So hello friends. Before we start, just few instructions. I would like if everybody keep their audio muted. If there are any questions, you can put those questions in chat room. We will go through those questions and we will try to answer each and every questions whatever you have. So let's start. So dear friends, I, Dr. Sachin Kadams, welcome you to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Koshika. Koshika is one of the branch of India's premier biotech product development company, Advanced Cells Group. At Koshika, our continuous efforts to provide you with authentic, high quality, standard primary cells required for scientific research and breakthrough in the field of healthcare. Our USP is that we prepare these primary cells as per your requirement. Without any further delay, let me introduce you with today's speaker, who happens to be my very good friend and colleague from NCCS Pune. Let me introduce Dr. Gitanjali Tomar. She's a stem cell biologist and TEDx speaker, who's presently working as an assistant professor in the Institute of Bioinformatics and Biotechnology of renowned Savitribai Phule University, formerly known as Pune University. She has earned her doctorate from National Center for Cell Science, Pune, and she has also awarded prestigious DST Inspire Fellowship from Government of India. Her research interest is in stem cell biology and biomaterial development for tissue engineering application in regenerative medicine. So I welcome you, Dr. Gitanjali, and let's start with today's webinar, which is on stem cells and its application in regenerative medicine.
Thank you, Dr. for a nice introduction. Hello everyone. I am Dr. Gitanjali Tomar, and I am working currently as assistant professor at Pune University. And today I am thankful to Advanced Cells and Koshika for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences about my research with stem cells, and again my experiences about applying these stem cells to regenerative medicine. So before I move on to sharing my experiences about researching with stem cells and regenerative medicine, I wish to give you a brief introduction about what are stem cells. So for a cell to be called as a stem cell, we the cells need to fulfill certain criteria so that I can call it as a stem cell. These are some of the criteria that I have mentioned, which is potency, self-renewal capability, and their clonal nature. I'll be coming to them in detail and explaining what do they mean. So only when these three criteria are met, then I call a cell as a stem cell. Now, basically, stem cells, the term is coined, or the term is used for defining the cells that are capable of giving rise to different tissues. Means we can use them for treatment purposes, and we can regenerate, or we can achieve regeneration of different tissues with the help of these stem cells. So the first property that I mentioned is potency. Potency actually means the capability of the cell to give rise to, which in scientific terms we call as differentiate into. So to differentiate into different kind of tissues other than itself. So when we talk about the potency, the first cell that can be isolated is from the blastomere, because basically the zygote is formed by fusion of sperm and egg, and this zygote is a single cell which undergoes repetitive multiplications through mitosis, and it forms a number of cells. Now, when it reaches a 32 cell stage, this stage is called as a blastomere. And if the cells are derived from the blastomere, they are totipotent. Totipotent means they are able to give rise to a complete organism, and this blastomere in utero is capable of giving rise to a complete organism. And therefore, the cells which are derived from the blastomere are totipotent. Now, when this blastomere further divides, there is differentiation or development of three germline layers, which is the endoderm, ectoderm, and the mesoderm. And when this differentiation occurs, this stage is termed as embryo. And if we derive stem cells, or if we derive cells from embryo, now these cells, the fate of these cells is already determined. They whether belong to ectoderm, or they belong to endoderm, or they belong to mesoderm. So now their potency means at blastomere stage, the cells were naive. Their fate was not determined, and therefore they were giving rise to a complete organism. Now at an embryonic stage, their fate is determined. They have determined a location where they are present, and therefore their potency reduces, and these cells are called pluripotent. That means they will be capable of giving rise to almost all the tissues or all the cells of the body, but they will not be able to form a complete organism. So this is how the potency decreases. Now when the embryo develops and finally a fetus is formed, a baby is born, this stage in terms of cell biology or in terms of developmental biology is termed as an adult stage. Although it is a fetus, it is a baby, we call it as an adult stage, because now in the body of a fetus, almost all the cells have a fixed function, they have a specialized function, and their fate is now fixed, because a muscle cell will remain a muscle cell, a heart cell will remain a heart cell, and therefore these cells are now called as multipotent, because they won't be able to give rise to a lot of cells, but yes, a few. Like mesenchymal stem cells can give rise to osteoblasts or chondrocytes or myocytes. So their potential of differentiation into different variety of cells other than themselves reduces, and now they become multipotent, after which they become unipotent, because now their function is fixed. They are no more naive, they belong to a particular tissue or a particular organ, and so they are unipotent, or we also term these cells as somatic cells, because these cells will now not give rise to any other tissue or any other cell. So these multipotent stem cells, which are usually derived from an adult body, are categorized into mesenchymal stem cells, hematopoietic stem cells, and neural stem cells. Now there is one more category of cells, which is induced pluripotent stem cells. Now, since as the word clearly indicates, these are pluripotent cells, means these would be the cells which would be capable of giving rise to many tissues, or almost all the tissues of the body. And these cells are induced. That means they are not naturally occurring. Embryonic stem cells are pluripotent and they are naturally occurring. But these pluripotent stem cells are created, or they are induced by reprogramming of somatic cells. Somatic cells, as I had mentioned, are unipotent. They are not capable of giving rise to any other cell. So if these cells are reprogrammed, or their memory is reversed by transformation of some of the transcription factors like c-MYC, KLF4, OCT4, or SOX2, then these cells can be reverted to a pluripotent state. So these are the kind of cells which have been gaining a lot of popularity nowadays, because from a somatic cell, the researchers are capable of creating a pluripotent cells, and a lot of tissues can be created from these cells and studied. The next property for a cell to be called as a stem cell is self-renewal. So we all know that when normally when a cell divides, it gives rise to two daughter cells. And that is a symmetrical cell division. But when a stem cell, active stem cell, means whenever it is required, whenever a stem cell divides, it always undergo an asymmetric division. So one of the cell that is formed is the daughter cell, which responds to the environmental cues it receives, and it differentiates into osteoblasts, adipocyte, chondrocytes, and many cells that are present or that are required by the microenvironment. Whereas the other cell remains in the stem cell stage, and this is how the pool of the stem cell in that particular microenvironment is maintained, and that stem cell niche or the stem cell pool is maintained, and whenever it is required, these cells again undergo asymmetric division, and therefore they are termed to known to self-renew themselves. They can renew their pool from time to time. The third property is the stem cells are clonal in nature. This is a very important characteristic feature of a stem cell, that when we grow stem cells in culture or in body, these cells are known to be derived from a single cell. So there are these cells proliferate, they divide, and they form a large number of cells. And all these cells are being formed by division of a single cell, and therefore we call it as a clonal population. So stem cells in vitro, mostly they grow in the form of colonies, and these colonies of cells or the clusters of cells are derived by the division of a single cell. So we call it as a clonal cell population. Now, when we talk about the types of stem cells, as I had already mentioned, that there are embryonic stem cells, adult stem cells, and induced pluripotent stem cells. So embryonic stem cells are derived from the embryo, whereas induced pluripotent stem cells are induced somatic stem cells into pluripotency stage. Now, when we talk about adult stem cells, it is the most popular type of cell which researchers mostly work around, because these cells are quite easy to obtain. The sources or the tissues are quite easy to obtain, and there are less ethical issues associated with adult stem cells, because working with embryonic stem cells or even induced pluripotent stem cells for that matter is associated with a lot of ethics or ethical concerns, and therefore there are very few researchers who plan or aim to work with embryonic stem cells. But yes, induced pluripotent stem cells come to the rescue, and the pluripotent stem cells can be provided even in the form of iPSCs. So basically, I'll be further talking about the adult stem cells, because that is the type of cell which most of the researchers and even my lab, we work with adult stem cells. So this is the hierarchy of the stem cells that I had already mentioned. So when I talk about adult stem cells, there are two types of, there are two major types of adult stem cells that people work with. The first is the hematopoietic stem cells, which I have written here as HSCs, and the mesenchymal stem cells. I'll come to that in the later slides. So these hematopoietic stem cells are obtained from bone marrow or even from blood. And these hematopoietic stem cells are known to differentiate or known to give rise to two lineages of cell, which are the myeloid progenitor cells and the lymphoid progenitor cells. The myeloid progenitor cells, they further give rise to the cells of blood origin, which are the megakaryocytes, eosinophils, basophils, erythrocytes, monocytes, which eventually form the dendritic cells and the macrophages and the neutrophils. Whereas the lymphoid progenitor cells are known to give rise to T cells, B cells, natural killer cells, and eventually the plasma cells. So this is the fate of hematopoietic stem cells. As far as the mesenchymal stem cells are concerned, which I have abbreviated them as MSCs, they can be obtained from a large number of sources such as bone marrow, peripheral blood, umbilical cord blood, Wharton's jelly, umbilical cord, placenta, amniotic fluid, dental pulp, adipose tissue. So there are a large number of tissues from which these MSCs can be derived. However, they also differentiate into a variety of tissues, as I mentioned here: bone, adipose tissue, muscle, nerve, myocardium, liver, cartilage, and so on. But the important point that needs to be mentioned here, and that needs to be taken into consideration, is that if I isolate mesenchymal stem cells from adipose tissue, probably its efficacy to form a bone tissue won't be much higher. Whereas if the MSCs are derived from bone marrow, their efficacy to form a bone tissue or a nerve tissue or cartilage would be much, much higher. So if you wish to apply the stem cells for a particular cell-based therapy, then probably their efficacy to differentiate into a particular organ for which the regeneration is required needs to be taken into consideration, because not all the cells or MSCs derived from all these sources, they will not efficiently differentiate into all these organs or all these tissues that I have mentioned here. So the efficacy of stem cell differentiation into a particular tissue needs to be studied well before we go on with our regenerative approaches. So there are a large number of tissues that can be regenerated and that have already been reported and well studied by researchers by using mesenchymal stem cells. So the neuronal cells, corneal regeneration, the dental tissues, hepatocyte regeneration, spinal cord injury, cartilage repair, bone regeneration, muscle regeneration. So there are many reports about regeneration of these tissues with the help of mesenchymal stem cells. Other than regeneration of the tissues, mesenchymal stem cells, or stem cells for that matter, also find their application in gene therapy, personalized medicine, bioengineering. Now, bioengineering is the field that I'll be focusing my further talk about, because this is the field which we have been working since last 8 years. The stem cells also find their use in pharmaceuticals, their anti-aging properties, for organ repair, tissue repair, and even for cancer treatments. When I talk about bioengineering, as I mentioned, that is the field that I have been working over since last many years, require the isolation of stem cells from a particular tissue of the human body. When these cells are isolated, they are allowed to proliferate in vitro, and they are expanded to large numbers, and then these cells are bioprinted. Now, when I say bioprinting, it's a technology that has come up in the last 4 or 5 years. So there are 3D bioprinters, 4D bioprinters, where the cells can be printed in the form of a 3-dimensional structure. Now, the bioprinter requires printing of these cells with the help of bioink. So that ink that is used for printing is mostly, in most of the cases, people use hydrogels or different types of polymers for printing these cells. So along with these polymers or hydrogels, these cells can be arranged in a 3-dimensional structure, and that 3-dimensional structure can be implanted at the site where the regeneration is required. It's not only cells, but even the cell spheroids. You can see these are the 3-dimensional spheroid structures. Even these spheroids can be formulated in the form of a 3-dimensional structure. These spheroids can be formulated in the form of a 3-dimensional structure, and these 3-dimensional structures can be then implanted at a particular site. Sachin, I am still audible, right? Hello?
Yeah, ma'am, audible.
You're audible.
Okay. Yeah, yes. Okay. So this is how the technology of bioengineering in terms of 3D printing works. So these are some of the inkjet printers are used. The extrusion printing is also used. Even using a laser, these spheroids are placed in a well-organized manner, and these 3D structures can be formulated. So in our research, we have also started using some of such scaffolds and the cell-based spheroids. So I'll be discussing in the next slides how we actually apply these stem cells for tissue engineering purposes. But before I move on to the tissue engineering, I would like to on top of your teeth. So we isolate the mesenchymal stem cells from gingiva. And why do we isolate it from gingiva is, as it's an interesting fact that it is easy to get gingiva from the dental clinics, because usually the dentists, they throw away gingiva after crown lengthening procedures or after RCT. This gingiva is usually a waste material. So we collect it from the dentist, and it's a small tissue, but it yields a huge number of cells. And we collect it from the dental clinics and isolate the stem cells from them. And even sometimes we get periodontal ligament when there is a tooth removal or RCT procedures going on. We are able to get periodontal ligament also. So whenever now further I talk about mesenchymal stem cells, they are derived from gingiva. Mostly are derived from gingiva. So in one of our studies, we tried to formulate a nanoparticle based conjugate. So we designed or we fabricated hydroxyapatite nanorods by chemical synthesis method, and we just allowed physical adsorption of parathyroid hormone on these nanorods. Why physical adsorption? Because hydroxyapatite shows different properties at different pH. So we wanted this parathyroid hormone to get released on its own when a pH changes. As you know, that parathyroid hormone is the only anabolic therapy that is available in clinic for treatment of osteoporosis. That is why we stuck our research to PTH. So now these conjugates of hydroxyapatite along with parathyroid hormone were injected into osteoporotic mouse. We created osteoporotic mouse by ovirectomy. And what we observed that, these are some of our results. We observed that these nanorods along with parathyroid hormone were capable of facilitating, or I must say enhancing, differentiation of mesenchymal stem cells into osteoblast. Osteoblast, I must again mention here that these are the functional units of the bone. And whenever a mesenchymal stem cell differentiates into osteoblast, we term this process as osteogenesis. And the osteoblast in the bone is capable of secreting the matrix. For in case of bone, the matrix is calcium phosphate. And so if I want to quantify whether an MSC, which is a mesenchymal stem cell, is differentiating into osteoblast, I usually quantify it in terms of secretion of calcium phosphate matrix, or accumulation of calcium phosphate matrix, and secretion of bone matrix proteins. So this calcium phosphate, which was accumulated here by the differentiating osteoblast, was quantified by using alizarin Redis, and we found that these nanorods along with PTH were capable of enhancing the osteogenic differentiation, as can be seen by increased alizarin Redis and bone-associated alkaline phosphatase. Even we found in vivo that in osteoporotic mouse, these nanorods were able to enhance the process of osteogenesis, as can be seen. This is the green staining which we have. These are the bone slices of the mouse, and we did a confocal microscopy for this, and we found that there was an increase in accumulation of osteocalcin as well as collagen type 1. Osteocalcin and collagen type 1 both are the matrix proteins of the bone, and these matrix proteins, they accumulate calcium phosphate on them. So even in our in vivo results, we were able to find that this conjugation of nanomaterial and parathyroid hormone was showing Is it working now?
Yeah,
Hello, is it working?
It's fine now. You. Yeah.
Okay. There are some network glitches in between, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next study that we did was, we also tried one of the scaffolds, that was the UHMWPE polymer. So it's ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's a polymer that is used for bone tissue engineering applications. And these polymers were treated with plasma. So it was basically oxygen or nitrogen plasma that was used. And the plasma treatment was found to develop functional groups on the surface of these polymers, and these functional groups, they facilitated adhesion of mesenchymal stem cells on their surface. So as you can see here, this is an untreated UHMWPE polymer, and when we seeded the cells on the treated surfaces, you can see the cells adhered to their surfaces. These are the SEM images, scanning electron microscope images. And you can see that all these treatments have caused adhesion of the stem cells on their surface. And even an increase in proliferation was observed when these treated surfaces were incubated with mesenchymal stem cells. When we induced these mesenchymal stem cells for differentiation into osteoblasts, we observed that these polymers supported osteogenic differentiation of MSCs as we can see from accumulation of collagen type 1 and osteocalcin. So this we published this study stating that the UHMWP polymer on plasma treatment was capable of stem cell adhesion, proliferation, as well as differentiation. So this was one of the studies that we did. In our future studies, we are currently aiming at creation of scaffolds, impregnate them with stem cells, and use it for the purpose of intervertebral disc regeneration. Now, the intervertebral disc, as you know, is a weight-bearing bone, and it is prone to defects and deformities because of herniation, because of bending, wrong bending postures or sitting postures, and this IVD becomes quite prone to defects. Basically, the cellular structure of IVD is difficult to regenerate because this is a hypoxic region. So now we are creating a scaffold seeded with stem cells, and we are now aiming at regeneration of this intervertebral disc by implantation in small animal model, and then maybe we can move to the higher models. So we are using hydroxyapatite and collagen for creation of this scaffold and impregnation of the stem cells with that. Okay, so these are the applications of tissue engineering where we can use the scaffold for seeding the stem cells, or we can use the stem cells alone in the form of spheroids or a 3D structure. There is one current application that we have started working on, and probably that is a most valid application, which is the need of the hour, is on the basis of immunomodulatory properties of mesenchymal stem cells. Now, I must mention here that mesenchymal stem cells are, what should I say, they usually do not get rejected upon allogenic transplantations. Means if the stem cells from one donor is transplanted into another recipient, then usually they do not get rejected because they do not have MHC class 2 or HLA-DR, and therefore they are capable of modulating the immune system. However, these mesenchymal stem cells are also known to secrete anti-inflammatory cytokines, and therefore they have found their use in diseases or damages that involve high amount of inflammation. One of the disease where is rheumatoid arthritis, and a similar kind of approach is required probably in the disease which we are facing currently. So let me focus on what is the pathophysiology of COVID-19. I'll just brief how the pathophysiology is. Viral particles, they enter the body. They lead to recruitment of macrophages, neutrophils. So these macrophages and neutrophils, they engulf the viral particles, and they present it to the T cells. So the antigen presenting cells, they present these viral epitopes to the T cells. The T cells in turn get activated, and they activate the B cells, which eventually form the antibodies. So this is a cascade of activation of cells whenever a viral particles enter the body. But this series of activation, or this cascade, involves secretion of a lot of cytokines from these cells. Cytokines such as IL-6, TNF-alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-8. And these are the category of cytokines which are termed as pro-inflammatory cytokines. Means they increase the inflammation in a given area. As a result of increase in inflammation, there are certain damages that are caused, because these cytokines are released in such a huge quantity that there is a cytokine storm. And because of that cytokine storm, there is increased permeability of the blood vessels that results in damage of the blood vessels, eventually fibrosis of the lung tissue. As a result, the blood oxygen carrying capacity of the blood decreases because the capillary size goes on decreasing, and there are then several lethal effects or the damaging effects that we have been studying recently. Now, how mesenchymal stem cells can come to the rescue here? Since this whole damage is being caused because of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, we know that mesenchymal stem cells are capable of secreting anti-inflammatory cytokines. So, along with the antiviral therapies that are already being given to the patient for treatment of COVID-19, if mesenchymal stem cells can also be administered systemically, so if they are administered systemically, they will reach the lungs. And since the capillary size of the lungs is so thin that probably they do not, they won't be able to circulate to the whole body once they reach the lungs. And there, the inflammatory cytokine storm can be reduced with the help of mesenchymal stem cells. And probably as a result, the damaging effect that is caused because of that cytokine storm can also be reduced if MSCs can be used in conjunction with any ongoing therapy that is going on. So probably the viral load can be taken care of by the antiviral drugs, and the MSC dosage can be standardized so that they do not completely shut off the function of T cells and B cells, but yes, they do control the inflammation that is causing the actual damage. So we have started working over it. We are trying to develop a model for ARDS, which is the acute respiratory distress syndrome, and we are now trying to address it with MSCs, and we are now seeing that whether it is able to reduce the inflammation or not. So we are working over it, and this is how we are trying to strike a balance between bioengineering and therapeutic applications, and this is how it is going. And now, since all these kind of work requires an extensive interdisciplinary approach or a multidisciplinary approach, the people whom we work with range from physicists to chemists to dentists, then people who are able to develop the animal disease models, and the physicians we are working with. So we are having a close knit of collaborators, and we form a core team with whom we are working. And this is my team. So Jay and Saili are currently doing PhD under me. Most of the work that I have shown have been done by Jay and Saili and the previous students who have already done their work. And these are the MSc, the lot of MSc students who are currently doing their projects under my guidance, and they form a part of our team. And this is about my research. I would be happy if there are questions.
So guys, if you have any questions, please type them in our chat box. Geetanjali, thank you so much. It was really a informative lectures. The way you have explained basics of stem cells was much needed, and I'm very sure all these participants have got a clear idea about the stem cells. Your research on nanorod that can help in osteogenesis was really interesting. Also, the way you have diverted your topic from a regenerative medicine like bone tissue engineering to a present situation that is COVID-19, and how MSCs can be helpful treating COVID-19. It was also really good. So there are a few questions which have started appearing. I'll just read them for you. You may answer it right here.
Okay, I'll keep sharing my screen because that has my contact details in case
Sure.
if somebody requires. Yeah.
So Gajanan is asking, what is the efficiency of stem cells /iPSCs 3D printed structure for neural tissue engineering? Have you considered any surface charge on polymer used in your studies?
Okay. So I would answer both these questions separately, because I have not yet used polymers for neural tissue engineering, so probably I won't be able to comment on that. But about the efficacy of the stem cells, as far as the stem cells that can differentiate into neuronal tissue is considered, the mesenchymal stem cells that are derived from bone marrow, that are derived from dental pulp. These two types of stem cells have been known to possess the highest efficacy in terms of neuronal differentiation. So there are studies where people have done in vitro as well as in vivo studies where bone marrow and dental pulp have been found to be equally efficient in terms of neuronal tissue regeneration. And even the iPSCs. The concern with iPSC is, as I said, that iPSCs are capable of differentiating into any tissue. So probably iPSCs ka efficacy as such need not be determined, because they are equally effective in forming the tissues you induce them to form. But the concern with iPSCs is most of the times in vivo application of iPSCs has been found to be associated with the formation of teratomas. These cells, they form 3D clumps or clusters, and these teratomas may eventually form tumors. So there are concerns with iPSCs. But yes, adult mesenchymal stem cells from bone marrow and dental tissues people have already studied. The second question is about the charge on the polymer. So I have till date used polymers for bone tissue engineering. I have not yet thought about shifting it to neuronal regeneration. So for bone tissue engineering, as I had shown one of my paper, the data from one of my paper, apart from studying osteogenesis, that is differentiation of MSCs to osteoblasts, we also studied osteoclastogenesis, which is the osteoclast formation. Because if I say that I need to use this scaffold or this polymer for bone tissue engineering, all the types of cells will come and sit on the polymer. So it's not only the MSCs and the osteoblast, it's also the osteoclast. So we found that these charged groups, when I say charged groups, for this study, we treated with oxygen plasma and nitrogen plasma, and we found that it led to the development of COO minus and NH2 groups on the surface. And these were the two groups which were facilitating the cell adhesion. But it was not facilitating for development of osteoclast, because development of osteoclast is totally different process as compared to development of osteoblast. So it's not like the development of charge will facilitate all the types of cells. The kind of cells, its development process, that will govern that the polymer would be suitable for what kind of an application.
Okay, great. Aditya is asking, can you elaborate on IVD and hypoxic condition is corrected with MSCs?
Okay. See, hypoxic condition do not need correction, because this is the condition where IVD is present. The IVD indigenously is a hypoxic structure. It does not require removal of hypoxia, but regeneration of IVD requires reconstruction or regeneration of nucleus pulposus, which is the central part of the IVD, and the annulus fibrosus, which is the surrounding part. So this part needs to be regenerated, and for regeneration, whatever cell you use should be able to survive in hypoxic condition, because the condition there is hypoxic. Stem cells are capable of surviving under hypoxic conditions. So probably they solve dual purpose. First, their capability of surviving the hypoxic condition, and secondly, their capability of regeneration of nucleus pulposus and annulus fibrosus. So we do not need to remove the hypoxia. Hypoxia is not a problem there. That is the indigenous, that is the basic part of IVD. What we need is tissue regeneration in hypoxic condition. So which cell to choose for? MSCs can be chosen because they do develop under hypoxic condition.
Okay. Nivedha is asking, can MSC be useful as potential cue to treat and kill cancer cell? Okay.
Not directly, because you might have come across a terminology which is called as cancer stem cell. So if these cells, MSCs, are directly used to treat cancer, and if we try injecting them into the cancer tissue, they convert into the cancer stem cells and probably are of no therapeutic importance. Instead, these stem cells can be used as drug carriers. They can be used as carriers for genes, which can carry the genes at the tumor site, which can carry the drugs at the tumor site, and where they can be activated and used for killing the cancer cells. So probably the inherent property of MSCs cannot be used, but these MSCs can be used as a carrier for cancer treatment.
Okay. Divya is asking how MSCs are derived from gingiva.
Okay, so there is a procedure. If you wish, you can contact me on my email. I can share the publications with you. We usually use enzymatic degradation for mechanically disintegrating the gingival tissue. we use collagenase enzyme to disintegrate the gingival tissue, and as the tissue disintegrates, the matrix is removed and the cell-cell adhesions also loosen up, and the cells can be obtained as a single cell suspension.
Okay, if you can share that last slide where you have given your email address, it will be great, so that people can, Then here's our another friend, Sivash. He's asking, can you please comment on final fate of MSCs when given to COVID patient?
Okay, so this is again a good question, because this anyways is going to be a matter of concern, that what would be the fate of the stem cells. But probably since the lung tissue means COVID-19 is associated with damage to the lung tissue, and since mesenchymal stem cells are also known to differentiate into some of the lung tissues, probably these cells might eventually differentiate into the lung tissues and start doing the normal function, or probably they might cause some kind of damage to the tissue. This needs to be worked out. That is why the small animal studies needs to be done first, and probably after the studies, the lung tissues can be derived from the animals. They can be sectioned, and we can study them for any kind of necrosis that stem cells might cause. But probably the dosage can be standardized so that the damage caused by MSCs does not overshine the damage already that has been caused. So that dosage can be.
Yeah, that's right. I'll just add to this, like in case of COVID, like we are giving IV injections of stem cells, and generally when we give IV, like cells tend to migrate to our lungs, and they start and home there basically. And it's been seen that even in case of different therapies where IV is given, there is not much of an adverse effect has been seen, but you have correctly said that the doses needs to be managed properly to to have a standard or a good effect. Arihant is asking, what is the efficacy of stem cell in regenerating or repairing kidney?
Okay. So the stem cells that are being derived from bone marrow, there are few studies about regeneration of kidney. There are not much of the studies, but the efficacy of bone marrow stem cells to differentiate into a functional kidney tissue is quite lower. It's not as efficient, and probably that is why people are mainly focusing on the use of scaffolds for regeneration of the kidney on its own. So the scaffold material, it elicits the kidney for its regeneration, and that is how the people are now approaching. But stem cells probably are not that efficient for kidney as it is for liver or pancreas or heart. Kidney के ऊपर studies थोड़े से कम है.
Yeah, I think you have answered his second question also. That is why is not so popular in case of kidney. Yeah. So you have answered that too. Parag is asking, it was great to listen you, ma'am. As you told, collagen and hydroxyapatite as biomaterial. So by using it, what is the time period of indigenous tissue to grow, and in what reason of, and what is the reason of choosing hydroxyapatite?
Okay, I hope this question is for bone, because hydroxyapatite cannot be used, is usually not used than bone and the associated tissues. So now the time or the duration for regeneration, or the time for taken by the indigenous tissue to take the space of the scaffold, depends on the size of the defect. If the defect is quite larger, then probably the time for the indigenous tissue to grow into the scaffold would be much higher. Until that time, the scaffold has to take over the function till the indigenous tissue grows. So the duration mainly depends on the type of the defect and the size of the defect.
Okay, Nadim is asking, can MSCs be used in dental problem and also in NIDDM?
Yes. Dental problems people have been using for regeneration of alveolar bone, which is your maxillofacial bone. Dentists have also been trying since years to regenerate a complete tooth, but tooth is a very complex structure. But periodontal ligaments, alveolar bones, and all these dentists have already tried with quite good efficacy. The dental tissues can be regenerated.
Okay, Sandeep is asking, is stem cell usable for chronic kidney diseases?
No, kidney, I don't find much of the reports for kidney. I don't know, probably I have never given it a thought or never read a lot about it. But I don't know why kidney has not been addressed much for stem cell therapy.
Yeah. Then Prasant is asking, what is the ethical issues with stem cell therapy?
Okay. So, see, there are different ethical issues with different types of stem cells. If it is an embryonic stem cells in a country like India, where female feticide still is a major problem that we face, if embryonic stem cells के ऊपर research करना allow कर दिया गया, people might take it as an excuse to kill the female embryos, because they might say that the researchers need it for research. So that different countries have different ethical concerns. In our country, this probably is one of the concerns, and that is why there are difficulties in getting ethical permissions for working with embryonic stem cells. As far as the adult stem cells are concerned, see, still the people are not very open to giving their tissue to somebody else for the purpose of research. So convincing the patient first is a major challenge. Second, the stem cells, since they have a lot of potential, how a researcher uses them needs to be very strictly monitored. And because of this, the rules and regulations are quite strict and stringent, that the cells should not be put to some illegal or wrong use. That is why these guidelines are required, and this causes sometimes problems, and this also makes the process slower. But anyways, these things are required. Yes.
Okay, Soundaram is asking, when MSCs differentiate after administration, can they cause graft versus host disorders?
Usually, the GVHD is not usually caused by MSCs. It is because of the graft that you are using. If you are using a polymer or a ceramic or any scaffold material for seeding the stem cells and then implanting, the major immune response or rejection occurs because of the material, but not with respect to the cells. Because as I mentioned in my talk, that mesenchymal stem cells, they do not have HLA-DR. Your body do not identify them as foreign, and they are able to bypass this immune system. So graft versus host disorder is mainly because of the graft material. It could be polymer, it could be ceramic, whatever graft material you are using could give you such a response, but not probably because of the stem cells.
Neha's asking, can you comment on efficacy of stem cells in cerebral palsy children?
Okay, cerebral palsy is again a kind of a neuronal disorder. I have rarely come across reports about cerebral palsy, but yes, there are few of the reports where the neuronal regeneration can be achieved with the help of mesenchymal stem cells. But I guess the studies are still confined to animal studies. I have not seen any kind of a human study that has come up for cerebral palsy. Only the small animal models and the large animal models have been studied for this. But yes, they are effective in neuronal regeneration in this case.
Vinod is asking, individual MSC populations are highly heterogeneous. How to deal with it?
Okay. Now see, the heterogeneity of the stem cell population depends on the source that you have chosen. Since I have been working with stem cells since last 15 years, Sachin, right? 2005.
Yeah, almost, yes.
So we have been working over it since last 15 years. And I wish to mention it here that when I started, or when we started, we used to isolate stem cells from mouse bone marrow. And that is the most heterogeneous population that I have ever seen. The next we switched to human bone marrow, and again that is a heterogeneous population. But again, human bone marrow can be purified for stem cells by repeated subculturing, and in 3 or 4 subcultures, you are able to manage a 90% purity of stem cell population. But again, when I switched to gingiva as a model for stem cells, I must mention that it gives you 99% pure culture of MSCs, because we take the primary culture for flow cytometry analysis, and when we do a FACS for the stem cell markers, almost the CD44, CD90, 73, STRO1, VCAM1, all these are more than 99% expression of these markers can be seen. So that is why I kept myself confined with gingiva, because that hardly requires any kind of purification. Again, if you have dental pulp is again a heterogeneous population, and purification is required. For that matter, periodontal ligament doesn't require that much of a purification. So it depends on the source. Adipose tissue doesn't require much of a purification. Umbilical cord blood doesn't require much of a purification. So it depends on what kind of source you have. And then the steps of purification could be minimum or maximum depending on the source.
Okay. I think last question Vinod is asking, since MSCs are primary cells and have limited doubling potential, clonal human MSCs derived from single cell rarely provide sufficient population doublings for the economical production process? Question mark. So
yes, that is why we need to look for the sources where the steps for expansion can be reduced, right? And that is why we shifted to gingiva, because when we were working with bone marrow, achieving a cell population of 10 raised to 7 to 8 passages, and then that increases the age of the cells in vitro. So that is why when we discovered that gingiva was giving a pure culture in first primary culture itself, we chose to stick with it. And if you have such a source where you can get a purified culture in the primary culture itself, then probably in 5 or 6 passages you will be able to get a large number of cells, and that also reduces the economic costing associated with the process.
okay, great. So I think that's all it for today. Thank you so much, Gitanjali, for such an informative talk, and thank you all participants to attending this webinar. Hope to see you again for our next webinar, and thank you so much, Gitanjali, again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.